Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, High Risk for Heartbreak. I am your host, Christina, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today. For those of you who are new here, I pray you find value in at least one thing I say today. And to my old and faithful returning crew, you know just how much I appreciate you. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offense in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. In the American education system, there is something that for decades, probably generations after generations, we can all collectively loathe together. And that is testing. When I was in school, as far back as I can remember, we were constantly testing. We had these things that were used on the tests and exams called scantrons. Do you guys remember those? Now, I don't know if they're even still used today, but our teacher would hand out these long slips. I'll see if I can insert a picture here with empty bubbles on them. And each question on the test would coincide with one of the bubbles that was on the scantron. And come on, sister, help me here. What were in those bubbles? The letters A, B, C, D, and E in some cases. These letters coincided with the answers to choose from on the test because it was a multiple choice test. We did a lot of multiple choice testing. I don't mind that. I like to be able to do narrative testing though too, where you get to write paragraphs and write out your thoughts. That was my favorite type of thing, but it mattered the medium. Obviously you wouldn't have that with every subject. We did though with the math. Math would give you some problems and you would have to solve them in the box. Anyway, we're talking about scantrons. We had the ability to choose which answers we thought were correct. Now, I'm going to be very honest. I was never a great test taker as a child, and even up into my early adulthood, actually probably up until 6 years ago, I could study for weeks and months, and still, when it came down to test day, I would just seemingly forget everything. Everything would just leave my mind. And I realized that I could learn really well and comprehend, but I could barely remember when it came down to test day. Testing to me was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure. I would second guess my answers a lot and not trust myself. There have been many major exams that I have failed because I went back after thinking that I didn't do something correctly and I changed my answer and the original answer was correct. That's happened a couple of times, by the skin of my teeth failed, which is so you need a passing score of an 89 or something like that in order to get this particular certification, and would miss it with an 87 or an 88 even. Very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. I would second guess my answers a lot, not trusting myself even after doing the work. And truthfully, that would only increase my anxiety around testing because I kept failing. So testing for me was very much mental. And not only were my teachers, of course, evaluating my ability to have retained proper information, right? They also were testing my efficacy under pressure. And that's where I folded. Tests, exams, quizzes, pop quizzes are all means to measure our knowledge and assess our fortitude, especially under duress, and to see if we know what we think we actually do. The character or the witness a person maintains when they are under a test in life reveals their level of confidence and their deepest nature. And it also exposes points of weakness. Now, maybe you are like how I was as a child, so tests made you anxious. You were an anxious test taker. Knowing the knowledge, but then folding under this pressure of a test, especially when you are aware it's a test, was one of the most frustrating things. The results of a test are a type of exam in and of themselves, right? When you think about what does a test bring up for you, and maybe it's not like a physical test like I was talking about, school style tests. Maybe it's a different type of testing that you're going through in your life, which we're going to speak about a little bit more in a moment. What it brings up for you is also a test in and of itself, right? And most importantly, when we think about tests from God, from the Father, that He's authorizing these tests, these fiery trials in our life. Whether we are aware of them or not, whether we are aware, but I think most importantly, when we think about the Father authorizing the tests that we go through, these fiery trials that we all experience within our lifetime, whether that we are aware or not that we're going through a test, because sometimes you're going through these tests, these seasons of testing, and you may not necessarily be aware life is just hard all around, right? But whether you're aware or not, it brings about an entire other level of examination of self, and hopefully so. So today, I want to discuss how important exams are for your heart and just how God, the great proctor, the facilitator of all tests, examines our hearts. So let's relate. The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. I recently watched a video of a man making silver pieces. He was melting the silver in this crucible, which kind of looks like a little bowl, and he would pour the melted silver into this mold to make a spearhead. Now, I don't know if you guys know what a spearhead is, but back in like ancient times, I mean, they'll probably still make them now, but for what reason? It would be for nostalgic purposes, I guess. But a spearhead literally goes on the end of a spear, and they're metal, like metal arrows, and would help with stabbing. I don't even know if I can say that word on here. Anyway, he was making spearheads. That's what I ultimately found out as I watched this video. The container or the dish that he was using was called a crucible, and it can withstand these extremely high temperatures that even metal, silver cannot withstand, and it doesn't destruct. But what it does is it helps the silver or gold or whatever you're melting down into it take another form of liquid. This crucible is not only a container for this silver that goes from pieces of silver into this liquefied form under high heat temperatures, but it also helps the silver to purge impurities that are within it all the way to the top, because the heat that the crucible is able to withstand allows for that. In this process, the metal worker was using multiple torches to heat up the silver, and I think he had like 2 or 3 of them on the silver. One was just pointed directly at the crucible, like on the side of the crucible, and then he had one on the top. I think it was 2 actually. That was more of a focused torch. And one thing that he said was that it was important to keep the heat targeted in one place of the silver. Now you've got all these little pieces of silver in this bowl, crucible, and he kept the heat targeted in one place of the silver versus moving it around like we might do with like a hair dryer or something like that. And the reason is, imagine taking a blow dryer and just targeting it on one part of your head. You would burn your head, right? That focused heat would hurt you. However, with the focused heat of the torch, once the middle part of the silver starts to melt, all of the silver will begin to melt. And the reason is the metal won't be able to cool. If you move it around, the metal is going to cool. But if you keep it in one place, it doesn't. I don't know how it works. That's just how it was working. That's what he was explaining. So he was slowly melting the silver down. This process was so interesting because in order for the silver to become moldable, right, it started out as all these little pebbly pieces. It needed to have the potential to take shape of another form, and it needed extreme targeted heat to be able to purge these impurities when it did melt. The crucible is one of the 2 most valuable parts to this process. The crucible is the one containing this precious metal from its original form to a new form, and it kind of is assisting in this process of change. And another is the heat source. And without a crucible that could withstand the heat source, these cold pieces of chipped and dirty metal would not have been able to take on new shape. Very few things can contain and withstand the heat of a torch of fire. Very few. And both are needed to help the silver to melt down, to make it something new. And this is like our relationship with God. He is this metal worker, knowing exactly what is in the content of our heart, us, these metal pieces that are all dirty and ragged and jagged and pebbly, broken up. He knows what's in the content of our heart and the content of our character. He knows the dirt and the impurities that are within us that we can hide from others, and the things don't make us as fine as we might think we are. He uses these exact moments in our lives that encapsulate us like this crucible encapsulating this metal. And he allows the heat, authorizing it to target us in one area for our ultimate reshaping. If you've ever noticed, there are moments when you will say you have had some car trouble and finally you get over all your car trouble issues and you start building your money back up, and then something else goes wrong. And it may not be even be on your car. It may be something with the house. It may be something with a debt or something like that. And it's like, oh man, every time I get up, I get, just when I start like getting into a space of comfort, then something else comes along and wants to break me down. At least that's how it feels, and wants to test me. But that's exactly what it's like. I've heard the old saints say, if you're not in a storm and you're not coming out of a storm, you're getting ready to go into one. And so these tests are like the metal making process. They hold us in this specific time and target what God is looking to purify us of and refine us for. And like the metal spearhead, it had a purpose chosen for it before he even melted the metal down. That metal worker knew he wanted to take these little pebbly pieces of silver and make them into a spearhead. And he knew that he wanted to remove all of these impurities that were in it. He wanted to melt it down enough so that everything could come together and he could clean it out. Right? So he had in mind the mold that he wanted to shape this metal into for a specific purpose and with an expected end. He didn't just take this and make it into nothing. He could have made it into a crucible bowl shaped thing. He could have just melted it and left it there, but he didn't. And when we think about our heart, this process of being tested, God does not take us through the test just to leave us there, to become the shape of whatever the test was. Every type of heart that has had to go through testing of any kind begins as a certain version of itself that has some level of occlusion or impurity, preventing it from showing up as the best version of itself. You build out this sort of survival strategy, taking years between the next interaction. You're brushing off anyone who seems familiar to your past. You get reclusive. You become less social altogether. And it feels like you have mastered this sort of protection plan of your heart. You're smiling, you're moisturized, you're minding your business, except for the business that is calling you to confront the place that you built these protections around, which is your heart. You have created this wall because you think that is going to protect you. But instead of the wall protecting you from hurt and pain, you are now contained in this space of eternal heat and fire. You don't want to really be isolated from others. You don't really want to be unloved. But when you have a heartbreak, it can make you feel like I'm good on that. Right? And that's the difference between the test that we take ourselves through and the test that God takes us through. Because what he wants to produce in us, using that focused heat during these fiery trials, it brings out the worst in us. It makes us confront these vulnerability insecurities. And like I mentioned, I had anxiety, still probably, around testing because it was making me feel like I didn't know what I was doing. It made me feel like I was not prepared. Regardless of how much I prepared, it made me feel like I was going to get tricked. And when you look at fiery trials like that, or you look at heartbreaks like that, and you don't allow yourself to, one, go through the whole process of being warmed, melted down, the filtered of the impurities, and then placed into a new mold to have a new purpose from that fiery trial, you will allow yourself to maintain the same shape that you had before. Those are the types of tests we like to go through. We like to put ourselves through those types of tests. Like, I don't need to change. Everything else around me needs to change. But that's the difference. Guess what those impure distractions have created in you when you do that? They create worry. They create a lack of submission to God. They create more weaknesses, more occlusions. And that's not what the Lord wants for us. He wants for us to lean into him in these fiery trials. He wants us to count it all joy. Count it all joy. Don't you see I'm in this fire? It reminds me of that meme with the little dog sitting in the fire and he's like, I'm fine. Or the Elmo that's in the fire, like, I'm fine. Yeah, it's exactly that. I'm fine. Count it all joy. If you are being tested, God is trying to produce something new in you. Tests purge our weaknesses, and it is up to us to invite God into this process of removing these impurities when they come to the surface. Like the metal worker, we must allow him to reshape us, to have more fortitude, to have more strength, more durability, and I think most importantly, have more of a willingness to depend on him. When we allow God to carry us through these fiery trials that he authorizes us for us to be in, the level of confidence that we begin to have in him when we come out on the other side is so different, because when we go into that next test, we know he is never leaving nor forsaking us. He is holding our hand, walking through it. It's like the 3 Hebrew boys in the fire, right? In that fiery pit, not coming out smelling like smoke. That there was a 4th man that appeared that kept them, right? It and comforted them. That is our Lord in the midst of a fiery trial, covering us, comforting us, letting us know that he is there. But when we don't allow him into that space as the metal worker to come in, to apply that heat, let that heat be applied, heat us up, melt us down, break us down, right? Pull out the impurities, pour us into a new mold to make us something very purposeful and specific for this next season that we're going to go into. We are missing out on our purpose. We are robbing ourselves of what the fiery trial is meant for in the first place. When we experience relational tests or tests that challenge us on a heart level, we have a choice of whether we are going to purge. We actually have the choice. Are we going to give up those occlusions? I think about diamonds, right? There's different levels of diamonds, whether they're natural. I think all synthetic diamonds probably have the same clarity. I don't know. I don't know much about diamonds, but I do know natural diamonds, naturally mined diamonds, should I say, are not all graded the same. Some of them have heavy occlusion. Some of them are not as clear. They're a little more foggy. And then some of them are extremely clear. And what it takes to get an extremely clear diamond, the amount of cutting, the process, the pressure. It's no shock to me that it would be the same with metal being melted down. Gold, silver, copper. It is no surprise to me it would be the same with a sculptor applying water, molding, reshaping, kneading, all of the things that have to be done to create the purpose of that thing, the new mold that thing will serve. And we have a choice of whether or not we're going to allow God to help us purge and give up those things that we've purged, like the heartaches and the offenses and the things that we can hold on to that kind of we almost idolize. And I'm going to be doing an episode on this, probably the next couple episodes, on idolatry and how insidious it is, how we don't know that sometimes holding on to our trauma is an idol. We will hold on to these things and keep them as these decorative banners of what we have been through. Look at what I've endured. Look at all my scars. Meanwhile, still acting from the same wounded place. The scars have healed over, and we show them off as a banner, as a testimony, but we are still that same wounded person because we didn't allow God to truly heal us from the inside out, to heat us up and melt us from the inside out and reshape us, remold us into a new creature. So we wear those banners, those scars on our banners, that uniform. We wear it every single day with all the badges, all the decorative badges on it, telling people a story about who we are before they even get to walk up on us, before they get to meet us, before you even say anything out of your mouth. And those of us who do have a need for God and acknowledge that God is in the midst of a test and lean into him, rely on him to carry us through these tests where we cannot carry ourselves, come out as a new creature. When we can give up that uniform, it changes our countenance and the way that we show up relationally, the way that we treat people, the way that they encounter us when we walk into a room. That changes despite what we've been through. That's what causes people to say, man, you don't look like what you've been through. What do you mean you were suicidal? What do you mean you went through depression? What do you mean you experienced domestic violence, rape? someone being offed. What do you mean your parents went through multiple divorces? What do you mean? I would have never known. The grace of God is all upon you. God's glory shines through you. That's what these tests are meant to do. They're meant to purify our hearts, to refine them so that we're able to apply what we have learned, which is something that can only happen with the most skilled worker working on us. That proper concentration of that heat and whatever area of our lives that God is working on next, God is trying to refine that area. Yet you, Lord, are our Father, and we are the clay. You are the potter, and we are all the work of your hand. When we let the Father work, something beautiful can be made of us, especially after a very strong season of testing and purging and refining. Tests may make us a little anxious in the beginning. They may challenge what seems natural in the moment, to retreat, to protect, to not let anyone in. They may make us want to hold on to these wounds, putting up a wall, a good fight against those who seemed familiar to the ones who hurt us. But it is in that crucible that a new work can be made from our heart. Tests refine, and tests evaluate and give greater purpose for our hearts. So don't let the pressure or the heat of those seasons of testing that we all have to go through rob you. Do not let it rob you of your refinement. Thank you so much for loving yourself first so that you can then go and love your neighbor. Until next time.